Often in life, we encounter events and circumstances that prove to move who we are internally with what seems to be minimal effort. The way I see it, sometimes we allow ourselves to be hollowed out and altered by soft circumstance, all because we try to maintain this somewhat hard exterior. A lot of people live their lives with their guards up. They don't allow too much to permeate through their defense. They don't allow anybody into their circle. They don't allow anyone to see them vulnerable. And this is all in order to protect themselves from the dangers and circumstances that are abundant in the modern day. Life contains a lot which can be thrown in our path. It has a lot of things that can be seen as negative or inherently are, that prove to change who we are and show us a little bit about ourselves each and every time they occur. I think there's always something to gain in a negative circumstance, even if it's, just learning that you don't like that situation, learning that little part about yourself rather than, not taking anything from it, learning to be, I don't know, more observant in the future. Life seems to throw so many things on our path, yet seems to also care for us at the same time. I think there's always that duality in life, that not caring yet caring at the same time, that anger and happiness, that sadness and joy. There are both levels and types of issues and methods we use to protect ourselves from them. But these methods must also vary just like our issues, otherwise we're going to be hollowed out by these soft circumstances. We can't always have a hard exterior, especially when we're encountering something that's a soft problem. Some things just don't need that heavy guard in order to overcome. And at some point, that heavy guard is somewhat making the problem more proficient, more profound than it needs to be. Because you're treating it as if it's some grand issue rather than a small little blip that's, just getting your attention in that very moment. I think I, as a man, have exposed myself to a certain idealism that restricts the way I used to or currently deal with issues. Rather than allowing things to be like emotionally stimulant, I tend to analyze the issues over that rather than, allow my feelings to be felt. Or maybe that's the way I feel my feelings. Regardless of which, some stuff isn't always, analytical. Sometimes problems are purely emotional and they don't need constant instantiations of our logic and reason. And sometimes people just feel certain ways regardless of, the reality of it. And you can't blame people for how they feel. You have to, you know, rise to the occasion in some ways. Like, of course, logical problems should be answered with logic, but you need to have the same methodology when you're experiencing problems that, correspond to different avenues of life. Like there's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. You don't think through a physical problem. You don't break your arm and say, or try to think, or some other facet of your ability to try to alter the problem. You apply a physical remedy. Rather than adapting to the nature of the problem, we harden ourselves. Problems are many things. Like I said, they're physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and the tools we use to heal it must correspond in order to help the self. We as a society hold on to the things that both harm us and allow us to be healed all in the same time, but we choose to utilize a certain tool at the wrong moments. And I don't know if that's necessarily a taught something or no one's really taught, but with this modern day like healing culture, everybody's woke now and all that, I feel like everybody's getting a lot of tools, but they're getting no application to these certain issues. Like they're learning meditation and whatnot, but they're not learning what it does. They're not looking, or they're just trying to not, I don't know. It's like they're not looking too deep into the methodology of it, the practice. They're looking at what benefits they can reap from these practices when they don't know exactly what they do. And I feel like a lot of that kind of blinds us and forces people to kind of adopt these certain things that they think is beneficial, and it causes some sort of a placebo effect for some short amount of time, but eventually they come to realize that these things aren't serving them. We as a society both hold on to things that harm us and expose ourselves to the pain through avoidance and neglect. Sometimes we allow issues to brush past us and alter us bit by bit, just as like a rock in like a river or something. Rather than allowing ourselves to flow with the nature of the issue, we go against it. And that's not to say you shouldn't like confront your issues, but in a means of like overcoming them. We often like try to neglect or avoid or convince ourselves that these things aren't really bothering us, rather than trying to have some introspection. And I don't think that it's necessarily difficult to introspect. I just think a lot of people don't know what necessary questions to ask themselves, or whether or not what they're doing is ultimately beneficial, or there's just a lot of unknowns within who we are as people. And I think a lot of people don't take the time to figure out who they are before they, make statements about it. Like, not everyone's going to know exactly how to heal from a specific situation that's catered to you, but that's something you're going to have to figure out. And that's something I guarantee you probably will. But you just have to be somewhat patient with yourself at the same time. I feel like a lot of people don't have patience with themselves and their circumstance, and they kind of accept a lot of what's around them as their reality rather than something they want to step away from. To flow with the issue so it no longer looms, allowing the self to be hurt and exposed so we aren't forced to be after a while when that problem finally, manifests into our actions and projections of the issue. Because I feel like a lot of that is just sitting in our subconscious, and it keeps being brought about through our actions because we haven't taken the time to properly assess the situation or attempt to heal from whatever has happened. Why be a hard rock when you really are a gem? A lot of us cannot see the value that we have as individuals, and that causes us to allow certain pains to propagate into our minds. So I guess the point of it all is to adapt and be present when dealing with things that tend to impact our being.